Hey guys and girls, KennyRaceBoy here, and today I'll be doing another how-to video. Yes, today is going to be how to change a tyre on your KLR 650. Pretty much a similar process with any other bike that has a tube inside, so you'll be able to follow along with this. And yeah, let's get straight to it, shall we?
So first and foremost on the order list would be a pair of tyre levers. We're going to need these tyre levers to take off the old one and to put on the new tyre. A new tube could come in handy if you do happen to split your old one, but it's always good to have a spare one lying around. And finally, the main part of the show, which would be your new tyre. Obviously you're going to need this to replace the old one. And with all that out of the way, let's get to working on the bike. Now, being that we're working on the rear of this bike, we're going to raise that rear wheel off the ground. I'm going to be using the centre stand on my bike, but if you have some kind of jack, you can use that too. Pretty much what we're going to do is going to remove that rear wheel. So on the KLR you have to remove this split pin, which is not reusable unfortunately. And then it's pretty straightforward, just get your breaker bar with a socket on there. I think this one here is a 27mm, it does vary between different bikes, but what we're going to do is we're going to torque that nut off. Once you've done that, just go ahead and remove all the washers and spacers off the axle. And then just go ahead and remove that rear axle. You can use a mallet. I'm using a wooden block here because I don't currently have one, but it all does the same thing in the end. Once that rear axle's out, we're pretty much on the home stretch of getting that wheel out. Push it forward and you can remove the chain like so. Now on the rear of the KLR we've got this floating brake assembly. So what you want to do is just hold onto the caliper when you remove that rear wheel so it doesn't hang by its hose. Then go ahead and put it back into its own slot. By now your bike should look something like this. Before we get working on that rear tyre, what we want to do is remove the spacer and also that rear sprocket, because they can fall off and you can probably lose some of the spacers inside. Working on top of the new tyre, what we want to do is remove that valve cover. Next up would be to remove that valve core inner. We're going to use this valve core inner removal tool. It's a bit of a homemade job, but it does the same nonetheless. Just let all that air rush out of the tyre valve and then we can get to working on the wheel. Now just go ahead and remove that valve stem nut. Now this is where things start to get real tricky. We're going to have to break that bead on that tyre. And if you've ever owned a dirt bike, you know that getting these things off is pretty damn hard. There are a couple of methods to doing this. As you can see, I'm currently jumping on it without any luck, but there are proper tools to actually do this. But after a bit of trial and error, I was able to use my tyre levers and also a bit of a pry bar. Just be careful on how well you go on this with your rim because you can scratch it. And then just go ahead and repeat the same process on the other side. Will be a little bit easier to do on this side because you've already broken the bead on the opposite. Now before we go ahead and put the new tyre on, some people will want to know how to protect their rim. Easiest and cheapest way I've found to do this would be to get a soda bottle, cut it up into 3 sections of course, and then what we can do is we can fold them over onto each other and create a bit of a rim protector. Now with that done, we can start levering away at that tyre. Essentially what you want to do is work your way around the tyre starting opposite the valve so you don't damage the tube. Once you get about halfway around, what you'll find is that you'll probably be able to get it off with your hands. Next up on the agenda would be to remove the tube out of the tyre. Just make sure you don't rip it of course, because that's when you need the new one. Easiest way to do it is to start opposite the valve again and then work your way to the valve. Last step in getting that tyre off is to remove the second half of the bead. So go from the inside of that rim and work your way across. It's not too difficult of a task. You'll pretty much find that you'll get a quarter of the bead off and then you'll be able to kind of push it off using your man skills. Now before we go putting that new tyre on, what we want to do is clean the rim. What it does is it makes it a whole lot easier when you go putting that new tyre on. On your new tyre you should find a couple of markings. They should be direction and where to put the valve. Unfortunately my tyre does not have a valve indicator, so I'm just going to stick it here. Using Windex we're going to lube that bead just to make things a whole lot easier when you go to seat the tyre, and putting that rim back on too. One last time, we want to make sure everything's in the correct direction and the correct orientation as well. Put half the rim in, and what you'll find is you won't be able to get it in any further than that, so flip it over and break out the tyre levers. Get it on just that little bit further, and then what you'll find is you can get it on with your hands. So next what we're going to do is prepare the tube. Get a garbage bag, fill it with baby powder, and insert the tube into the bag. Give it a good shake, cover the tube in all that baby powder. What this does is reduces the chance of you pinching the tube on the tyre when you go putting it back on. Put that valve core back into the valve stem, and then what we're going to do is just put a bit of air inside that tube. And again, what this does is to reduce the chance of you pinching the tube. Firstly, we're going to start at the valve, insert that into the hole, and then you can work your way around until you get it all the way inside the tyre. Put that stem nut back on, securing the tube into place. And for one last time, we're just going to lube that bead up again. Using your levers, we can lever the tyre onto the rim. Starting at the valve this time, we can work our way around until we get it all the way on. This may take a little while to get done, but what you'll find is you'll probably have to stand on the bead to stop it from slipping off. Once you get approximately a third of the way around, you'll want to push the bead down into the rim. As you can see, I'm standing on top of the tyre to make this happen, but it just makes it a whole lot easier to get that little last bit on. And there we have it. All there's left to do is to pump it up and to seat the bead. When you're seating the bead, it may take quite a fair bit of pressure. This is completely normal, and what you'll get is 2 loud popping noises. Once that happens, you know that your tyre is seated. Double check the bead on both sides, and then we can get to putting it back on the bike. Of course, what we want to do next is put that sprocket back on and just put that spacer in too. Now, putting that rear wheel back in is pretty much the reverse of taking it out, so it shouldn't take very long to put it back in. Hold the caliper assembly to one side as you roll the rear wheel in, and then you can put the caliper assembly on top of that. Roll the rear wheel as far forward as you can get it, and then you can put the chain back onto the sprocket. Lift the rear wheel up, and now you can insert your axle back into the wheel. Make sure you've applied a bit of grease to the axle so it doesn't seize into the wheel. Now fit all the spacers and washers back onto the axle the same way that they came off, and then we can go ahead and tighten them down. Now, using a torque wrench, what you want to do is torque this bolt up to 98 Newton meters, which is 72 foot-pounds. With a new split pin in hand, we're going to replace the old one and just go ahead and fasten it in there. Make sure everything spins nice and freely, and before our first ride we want to check our chain tension again and also balance that wheel.
So there we have it, guys. With a bit of grease on our hands and a bit of effort, we've saved ourselves some money and gotten a new tyre on our bike. All there's left to do is balance it up and get some riding in. Till next time, guys, I'll catch you later.